This is the story of my Chevelle. This video was made with Microsoft PowerPoint and edited with DaVinci 20 and narrated by AI. Back in high school, sometime in 1997, my dad brought home a 1971 Chevrolet Chevelle two-door notchback coupe from a local junkyard. He gave it to me as my first car. Being a junkyard car, it needed a lot of work. No front grille, no front bumper, and was painted purple. The paint job looked like it was applied with a roller brush instead of sprayed on. We spent weeks stripping the paint off, finding the missing parts, and getting it in shape again. I chose 1981 Porsche Red as the paint color and found a set of bucket seats from an '89 Skylark. Sure, those seats were cloth and blue, but I found some black seat covers for it. They were better than the old Camaro buckets with giant rips that someone had put in it. Well, after all the hard work was done, and I got my first job working at the local Dairy Queen, the Chevelle was my daily driver. Sure, it wasn't perfect. It was a good 10-footer, if you know what that means. But it was pretty reliable, except for the time the fancy chrome and glass fuel filter fell apart on my way to school. The Chevelle got its first wax job, so it would look its best when I drove it to my senior prom. I even had my senior pictures taken with it. Sadly, that same night, tragedy struck. At about 90 miles per hour on a country back road, I lost control on a turn. The people fishing who saw me said I was the third car to crash there in 3 years. The other two rolled. I bent the cooling fan blades. The battery slid into the radiator, smashing the side open. A tire was pulled off a wheel. A header twisted into the oil filter, and I hit the ground so hard I smashed the grille between the bumper and hood. Needless to say, it wasn't a pretty sight, but I walked away with just a bloody upper lip, so I was pretty lucky. I did fix what was needed to get it drivable again, but never all the body damage. A few months later, the transmission was starting to give me some issues. It was slipping often, so I had to have it rebuilt. I guess it didn't like going backwards in drive during the accident. A few months after that, it seemed the 307 small block V8 it came with was getting pretty tired. The car would shake at idle more than normal, and I had to put a quart of straight 30 weight oil in every 2 weeks. So I did a thing. I purchased a rebuilt 350 small block from an '83 Silverado for it. My dad and I switched the engines, but were surprised to find the 307 wasn't as bad as we thought. It had ripped a motor mount in half. After graduation, I was about to start a job where I would have to drive 40 minutes away at mostly interstate speeds. Not like I had never driven the Chevelle on the interstate, but 5 days a week didn't sound good. So I purchased a 2000 Chevrolet S10, and the Chevelle was parked under a tarp for a while. Then some girl backing out of her driveway, late for work, T-boning my S10 as I drove by. I tried to avoid her by going into the oncoming lane, but it wasn't enough. She actually hit me twice. Once in the door, and also the rear tire. So, in 2002, while the S10 was down, the Chevelle had to come back out. I pulled that tarp off and was horrified to see the tarp had rubbed the paint off in many spots. It wasn't a pretty sight. It fired right up and drove no problem. After a week, I did have to put an alternator on it, and the brakes were feeling soft. After the S10 was fixed, it was parked again, and it was obvious the power brake booster was about dead. In 2004, The Chevelle was still parked, and I had joined the army. The Chevelle was moved to a friend's parents' house to be stored in their garage. In 2005, my dad called and said the friend's parents were losing their house to the IRS and asked if I wanted him to get my Chevelle. Of course, I said yes. I was stationed in South Korea, so there wasn't much I could do. My dad picked it up, finding it had been parked outside under a tree the entire time, and put it in his cow pasture. This is where it stayed while I was in the army. The following pictures were taken when I got off active duty and came home in 2008. While I was in the army, I had gotten married and had 2 kids. We purchased our first home in 2011, but it only had a carport. But that was better than nothing. I did keep a tarp on it even under the carport. Finally, in 2020, we purchased a house that had a garage. I wanted the house because of the garage. 4 cars, storage cabinets everywhere, refrigerator, sink, its own bathroom, and TV with surround sound on the wall. That picture is from the listing, not my stuff. Knowing the Chevelle would have to move to get to the new house, I really wanted it to move under its own power, to get on and off the tow truck and into the garage. I opened the hood and knew it needed a few things first. An ignition coil because my brother had taken it for his truck when it sat in my dad's pasture, battery, fuel filter, and a few hose clamps. With everything on, I gave the key a turn. As you could see, it fired right up. I quickly shut it off when I noticed the carburetor looked like a water fountain. Now it was time for the power brake booster, master cylinder, and carburetor to be fixed. Off to the shop. It took a few months. We moved into the new house so we could have the old house worked on before selling it. The carport was torn off because it was falling apart well before we bought the house. I visited the shop once while the car was on a lift, and the mechanic gave me some good news. Even with all the sitting all these years, the underside of the car was in great shape. No rust. Another month later, it was done. After that video was taken, I drove it back to the old house, being followed by my wife just in case, but it had no issues. I parked it there while I found another tow truck to deliver it to the new house. Did I mention this was the first time I had driven it since 2002? It had been 18 years since it had been on the road. I wasn't going to try that day, but I think it could have driven for hours. The day came. It drove up onto the flatbed, 40 miles to the new house, then off the flatbed. Then again, I was able to get behind the wheel and drive it up the driveway and into the garage. It is now safe and sound in the garage. I have purchased lots of parts for it, but it will be a long road back to better than when I got it. At least for now, it will not get any worse. Thanks for watching as I learn about making videos. This is my most ambitious video so far. Please leave a like if you enjoyed it, and feel free to give suggestions in the comments. Hopefully I will be driving my Chevelle again soon.
If the chance